Ready?
Yep.
This is Vesuvius Iron Plantation, Vesuvius Furnace Iron Plantation. It's a slave plantation, and it was built during the time of the manufacture of iron. The actual iron furnace was across the road, and it's no longer there. The rocks from the furnace was put into a bridge, and it's no longer there. But this is the main house of the plantation, and is on the National Register of Historic Places. And it is open to the public because we have what you call a guest here and the drop-off, because it's talking about the Vesuvius Vineyard. And the last people who lived here was a man named Edgar Smith and his wife Elizabeth Smith, and they helped me with the history of the iron industry in Lincoln County. And this is where Hannibal Smith was brought here in the 1840s to work as a slave at the iron furnace. He was what we call they call him a forgeman. Well, normally they would have a German iron master, and but they found it more advantageous to get slaves from Africa who had a good, superior knowledge of iron manufacturing. We are here across the street from East Lincoln Middle School. Now, this is the historic spot, and you only see a bush here now, but the tree was here, and it was called the Thomas A. Edison tree. The Thomas A. Edison tree is because in 1923, Thomas Edison came here, parked his car right here, and he parked his car right here, and took a nap. He came to North Carolina in search of cobalt, and he was showed around Lincoln County by one Cicero Renneman from Iron Station, who showed him around the places that the cobalt might be. Remember, this was the area of the iron manufacture. They had what you call a ore bank, which was a lot of iron mining around, and he figured that where they had a lot of iron mining, they had cobalt. So he came down from New Jersey in search of this cobalt. So this was called the Thomas A. Edison tree. A couple years ago, for some reason, they decided to cut the tree down, and it's no longer here.
Go.
We are standing in front of what is left of the Wellington Lomax House in Iron Station, North Carolina. Wellington Lomax was the son of Bishop Thomas Henry Lomax, who lived in Charlotte. He was the bishop of the AME Zion Church. In 1805, he asked each one of his sons where they wanted to live. And all three of them said they want to live in Iron Station. So he bought this land here for Wellington, and they built this house in 1805. The last person to live here was Edith Lomax, and she was the last of that particular line of the Lomax family. The Lomax were descended from William Lomax from Fayetteville, North Carolina, and William Lomax was a Haitian immigrant who came to America with the Frontage Legion from Haiti, brought here by Marquis de Lafayette to help the Americans during the Revolutionary War. And it was two of them. One was called Philip Philippe Guerriere and William Guerriere. And William Guerriere, he didn't go back to Haiti when the war was over. He had deserted and went to New Jersey, changed his name from Guerriere to Lomax, and went back down to Fayetteville and joined the Continental Army. And he fought with the Continental Army for 5 years, and when he joined the Continental Army, they did not believe that he was a free man, because the blacks who served in the Revolutionary War had to have permission from their slave masters, or they had to have papers to say that they were free. So they let him serve in the military without pay. And at the end of the war, in 1819, he received a Revolutionary War pension. Then he asked for his 5 years back pay, and they pretended they didn't know what he was talking about, and he never got paid. He, in turn, had a son named Enoch Lomax, and Enoch Lomax met Dicey Hammond, and they had a son named Thomas. And Thomas married Elizabeth Carter, and they, who was what we called a Lumbee Indian. They co-founded the Howard School, which became Fayetteville State University. And then, like I said, so Lomax bought the Amy Zion Publishing House to Charlotte in 1896, and then he asked his children where they want to live, and they said Iron Station. And then Wellington, who was a brick mason, worked for the Kendrick Brick Company, which was in Mount Holly and Cherville. He went over there to work, and when he went over to work, he met a woman over there named Fannie Link. And they got married. They moved here in Iron Station here, because this is where Fannie Link's family lived. You ready? This is the fellowship hall for Mount Vernon Missionary Baptist Church in Iron Station, North Carolina. This was started out in 1902 as Mount Vernon Academy. Mount Academy was built in this community to serve the education of Afro-American children. It was designated as Negro District number 7. It was built in 1902 with lumber, and the land was secured from Andrew Link and his wife Susan. And it operated as a school until 1924. Now, this parking lot area here was the schoolyard, and at the end of the schoolyard, they had a pump. And then over there where the basketball goal is, they had what you call the coal house. The county would bring coal out, say in October, and then when wintertime came, they had 2 pot-bellied stoves on both ends, because they only had 2 classrooms, and they had 3 grades in one room and 4 in the other. And then they had this front part here was the kitchen, which was there. Now in 1924, the Rosenwald Fund decided to replace the Mount Vernon Academy and make it into a Rosenwald school. The Rosenwald Fund was started by Booker T. Washington at Tuskegee Institute, and he went to his rich friends, and they donated money. One of the donors was Julius Rosenwald, a Jew and president of Sears and Roebuck in Chicago, and he donated land. I donated money, and the idea was the county and the black community was going to uh, donate money to build a school. And this school was built, so the Mount Vernon school was built in 1924. Now you can see that these windows are not the original windows, because in the school they had these big bay windows all the way to the top. And of course, when the church took it over, they took and put those single small windows in there. And we are in the process now of getting this registered on the National Register of Historic Places. And and we're working with the state. And since then, we have put siding on the school. Of course, if it gets on the National Register, this siding must come off because it's not the original, we are pretty much along the way with this. We had to finish our 403C, 4A, what it is, with the tax exempt. And we were going to move now over to the church cemetery. The Mount Vernon. This is the grave of Adam Moore. He lived to be 109 years and 5 months old. He was born in 1832, and he served in Gaston County, and he served in the Confederate Army as a teamster. And in 1931, he applied for a pension, a Confederate pension in Lincoln County, and he was 99 years old. And they gave him a pension when he was 99 years old, and he lived to be 109. He served with the Company M of the 16th Regiment of Confederate troops, and he served. He went to Chancellorsville, Virginia, with his slave master's son, Miller Roberts. Of course, the son was killed at the Battle of Chancellorsville, and Adam Moore lived to get to the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, and he said that a Confederate soldier gave him a sapling from a cherry tree under which Lee had surrendered to Grant. He came back to Cherryville, and while he was in Cherryville, Jeff Davison and Breckinridge came through, and they touted him to take the Confederate treasury on to Greenville, South Carolina. Adam Moore, he helped build the Mount Vernon school and also the church, because the Andrew Link, he had run a store, he ran a brickyard, and he paid, and the people borrowed money, and they could work for their debt off by 50 cents a day by building churches and schools and houses for people as contractors. And that's the way the church was built, and that's the way the school was built, and that's the way several of these houses was built in this community. I've been told that these look like slave cabins, or they look like those tents down at Tucker's Road. This is a hotel. At the end of World War II, when soldiers was coming home, there was no hotels in Lincoln. So the town people built these small houses so that the servicemen could live, and their families, if they brought their families, they could live here and relatively free, relatively cheap, and until they started getting hotels built in Lincoln. However, there was a hotel in Lincoln called the North State Hotel, but it could not accommodate all the people that came here, and also this hotel accommodated a long-term stay. This is the Madison Durr Iron Furnace. This is a mural on the wall, a mural on the wall in Lincolnton, North Carolina, just off the Court Square. And I will start explaining what this is a Madison Durr, probably the partner being Jonas Durr. And I'm going to start on this end and explain how the iron furnace works. Had to come up this way. Right here. This is evidently a water wheel. Most of these furnaces were built near some sort of water or stream, and the water wheel operated what we call a ballast. These are the ballasts. The ballast was to keep a supply of air into the furnace. Now, they put the iron ore into the top of the furnace, and it goes into the furnace and it melts down into molten iron. And the iron would come out here. These are called pigs. And with the pigs, and once they get into the pigs, they let them cool, and they take them off, and they take them off. And then this guy right here, he would maintain, they would cool the pigs off with oil. And this right here is charcoal. Okay, now, going down to this end, you got the barn, where you bring the iron ore in, and the iron ore goes up there, and then it goes on the wheelbarrow, and they move along this way, and then they go down into the pigs. Now, and they have to have lime, so you had to have a lime pit somewhere. And in the beginning, the lime pit was in Kings Mountain until they found lime pits here in Lincoln County. Now, any questions about this iron furnace?
This
And
gentleman
the reason they used charcoal instead of wood is because wood would not give an even furnace, and they make charcoal out of the wood and burn it in the furnace, and it would have an even heat. Now, tell me what's wrong with this scene here.
I was looking at their nationalities.
Right.
He looks Asian.
Okay. There's only one black person
Right there, the top.
in this. In fact, he ain't black. You know, most of the people who worked in these furnaces were blacks. They were slaves. And number one, and number two, white people did not work on the furnace itself that gave in the direct proximity to the fire, to the flame. And another thing is, all of these people would have been black people, slaves in fact. Those people there would have been slaves. Those people there would have been slaves and black. That guy there is not black, he looks like he's an Asian, which Asians did not work in the iron furnace in Lincoln County. Okay? That guy could have been white, but you know, white right, not Asian. And that guy right there was Asian, definitely was not black. Because the reason white people did not work at these furnaces, work on the furnace itself, is because the life expectancy of a worker here was 7 years. These people, and the way they dress, they had these big coats, and they had in front of their pants, they had these big wooden aprons that fit down the leg. Why? Because the flame was so hot until over time it was actually cooked the veins in their legs, and you would eventually die what we call gangrene.
Wow.
So therefore they did not, a slave who started working here did not expect to live no longer than 7 years. Now, these furnaces, they were insured. They were insured by a company in New York called the New York Life Insurance Company. And in the case of Vesuvius, Vesuvius was listed on Wall Street. In fact, Vesuvius was at 54 Wall Street, New York, New York. The New York insurance company was at 58. And what they did is that these iron furnaces in Lincoln County, they had a business arrangement with these insurance companies. And at the time, there was a bank called the New York Bank. Well, the New York Bank didn't operate, they operated in the north, but they had a bank in Salisbury, North Carolina, called the Branch Bank of Salisbury. And these people worked together, and they insured these slaves because these slaves died, and there's a hazardous duty, so they want to be ensured that the owners did not lose any money with their slaves. And now, this Hannibal Smith, he came here, and he worked at this thing for 40 years, or 60 years. Well, why didn't he die? Why? Because he was in a supervisory position. He was a consultant. He told them how to operate this furnace, but he himself did not get near the furnace. Any questions? This was called a coal blast furnace. Eventually, they went out of business because they could not compete with the furnaces in New York and Pittsburgh, particular Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and all that, because they used coal in their furnace, and they were what you call hot blast furnaces. So these people could not compete. At the end of the war, the Wilkes brothers came down here. Edmund Wilkes and his other brother went over to High Shoals and bought, to rented the High Shoals mill, and they eventually went bankrupt. And I looked at the bankrupt papers, and it says that it was a foreign corporation. Now, I don't quite understand what it means by foreign corporation if it was listed in New York City as the Southern Iron Works. But anyway, they went out of business, and they leased at least 2 of these furnaces, but Madison Durr was not one of them. But Jonas Durr, one of the owners of Madison Durr, he has a reputation of being the ancestor at least 20% of the black population in Lincoln County, because he had at least 5 children by slave women. And he also gave the land for St. James in Denver, St. James Young Methodist Church, and also the land for Poplar Springs, Amy Zion Church. And the thing about that is, in the case of Poplar Springs, when he died, he left money in his will for his black children, would happen to be Francis and Jane Durr. And he asked that when he be buried, when he died, he wanted to be buried at St. James. Of course, when he died, the people contested the will and buried him at the Durr Cemetery down there on Little Egypt Road. And the land that was supposed to have gone to the Johnsons, they contested that will. As a compromise, they gave the land 184 acres. They gave a couple of acres to Poplar Springs so they could build Poplar Springs the black mill. But as far as the iron manufacturer, Iron Station is called Iron Station. It was called Sharon in the beginning. It's called Iron Station because they had about 10 iron furnaces within 10 miles of Iron Station.
How long did it take to do the mural?
I don't know how long it took to do the mural, but Darrell Harkey was down here explaining the operation. And my thing is, I asked Darrell Harkey why he knew the history of the iron industry in Lincoln County. Why didn't he tell them that the people who worked on the iron merchant were slaves? Because and then the iron masters would go to Charleston and buy slaves at the port of Charleston who had the knowledge of doing iron working, because they did not want to pay those German iron masters from Pennsylvania. We are now getting ready to go to the next site, and well, let's head that way. We are looking at a highway marker of Hiram Rose Revels, 1822 to 1901. First black to serve in Congress, native of North Carolina, senator from 1870 to 1871, operated, owned barbershop here in the 1840s. Here means in the parking lot here of the senior center in Lincoln. The thing about Hiram Roselle, he was born in Fayetteville in 1827, and they put 1822. I'll explain why that date is on there. Hiram Revels was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina in 1827. And in 1835, his family moved to Cabarrus County, and then they moved to Mecklenburg County, and they moved to Lincoln County, and they moved to Cleveland County. We're talking about the Revels family. Hiram came here to live with his brother, Elias B. Revels, who operated a store and a barbershop here in Lincoln. And he lived with his brother. His brother was married to Mary Bird. And when he came to live with his brother, Elias B. Revels died in 1841, leaving the widow and Hiram. But Hiram had been apprenticed as a barber, and the barber shop was here in this location. And he had a brother who was a blacksmith right down the street here at the Pleasant Retreat Academy. Well, anyway, Hiram died, and he owned two slaves, George and Eliza. And the